Um, so I am going to hand over. We have Steve Marois, who is the Director of Faculty Actions, and Maura Monahan, who is a business analyst at Boston, to tell us a bit about how they have been using the assessment module to streamline their faculty annual report. So, so I can see that you've shared your screen. Great, so take it away, go ahead.
Thanks, Natalie. Hello, everyone. Boston University over this past year embarked on an effort to simplify and improve the faculty experience with our faculty annual reports using Elements assessment module. So we took a look at using existing assessment module functionality along with custom reports to try to automate activity selection as much as possible. And we are really excited to share with our method for doing so and sort of what we learned along in the process. So I'm Steve Marois, the Director of Faculty Actions in the Office of the Provost, and I'm the business owner for the BU instance of Elements. And this is my colleague, Maura.
Hi, I'm Maura Monahan. I'm a business analyst in BU's Information Services and Technology Department. So I've worked on projects to implement Elements as well as to support our annual assessment.
So just taking a look at what I'll be talking about, we're going to start with just a brief overview of what our faculty annual report is, take a look at what our support model around that was and became, look at some feedback from faculty and some common pain points arising out of that, throwing COVID into it because why not, to see how that really impacted and informed our decision making, looking at how we approach change holistically, how we updated our support model, and then finally how we measured our success. So BU's faculty annual report, it's part of our annual merit process. So faculty have to submit an annual report in order to be considered for their raises every year. It captures all of their previous calendar year's activities, so it behooves them to put as much as possible on it. It eventually gets reviewed by their chairs, deans, eventually all the way up to the provost office, alongside with their increased recommendations, and gets approved together as one package. You'll see that there's a picture here of an example of one of our custom reports for the faculty annual report. We have a one-page version and a full version. This is the one-page one. Just kind of lays out how different types of information we're pulling from Elements combined with data collected in the assessment module, kind of lays it all bare in one page. In terms of the types of information we're collecting for the annual reports, as I mentioned, there are objects that are pulling right from users' Elements profiles. So things like teaching, publications, awards, service, and grants are all pulling from those related modules in Elements. But there's also a decent amount of information that is collected on a yearly basis within the assessment exercises themselves. So exercise level supporting information, such as their tenure status and any summarizing comments that they want to leave, whether or not they were on a leave of absence or sabbatical in the past year, some specific information about advising, just because we don't have a central data source for advising data. And works in progress that don't quite rise to the level of being included within the publications module. So you see, you'll see a picture of what all those sections look like, quite a laundry list in our assessment exercises. In terms of how we support this, we have an IS&T team that provides our operational support. So that's everything from the creation of exercises. I believe we had upwards of 50 different faculty annual reports created, just because different departments and schools have slightly different ways of doing things. They help to assign the users each year and to register the reports. Then in terms of providing support for the faculty, we have a structure where we have staff members either on the school or college level or department level who are familiar with Elements and can kind of be that frontline support when there are common questions or concerns that they can help their faculty with. We also have a support website with FAQs and a list of PDF and video guides to kind of help faculty with a self-guided approach to support. And then prior to the pandemic, we also held these in-person help sessions. So there would be a computer lab where a bunch of IS&T team members, library staff, and provost office staff would be there to assist faculty and sit with them as they went through their exercises, added in any data, completed their assessment. And that was probably the keystone of our support prior to the pandemic, and we'll get into how that all had to change. So in terms of the feedback that we'd gather for the faculty annual reports in assessment, I think our greatest source of feedback was those in-person support sessions, because we could see firsthand how faculty were approaching the exercises, where they would become confused or frustrated. We'd also gather emails from faculty or our departmental liaisons with the questions, concerns, feelings that were that kind of gathered throughout the cycle. And then we also created a faculty advisory board with representation from a wide array of our schools and colleges to have candid conversations about what's working, what works for them with the assessment, what doesn't work, and how we can improve it. Some common pain points that were identified as a combination of those three forms of feedback were faculty are in the system typically only once a year, only to do the assessment exercises. So anytime they log in, the system is very new to them and they kind of have to relearn it. And that makes it difficult for us to support because there is a lot of hand-holding that's required. Additionally, there were complaints that it was very time-consuming for them. Because it is a once-a-year activity for a lot of them, they are trying to input all of their activities into Elements and then having to do everything within assessment. And I think the biggest thing we always would hear was, why is my FAR blank? I just spent all this time putting in all this data, and it's because they hadn't selected the information with it, the items within the assessment module yet. So they were kind of frustrated with that. And then administratively, because expertise was required from technical team members, library team members, and provost office staff, depending on whether or not the questions were technical or more policy related, there was a lot of support needed on those on the ground in-person sessions. So it was just quite an administrative burden for us. And then, as I previewed, COVID-19 threw a wrench in many things, including our assessment exercises. So we really wanted to take this as a sign that we needed to simplify a process for faculty during what was already a very stressful year full of lots of changes and uncertainty. And we really want to provide a win for faculty morale by just making something that was an administrative burden for them as easy as possible when they have so much else to think about. And then on top of that, we had to eliminate our in-person support to accommodate the remote work arrangements for both faculty and staff, and to make sure we're also adhering to social distancing guidelines. And now I'll turn things over to Maura to talk about how we approached all of this.
Thanks, Steve. So like Steve was saying, when we began to think about how to improve the FAR experience for our faculty, we kind of knew right away there wasn't going to be one quick fix. So instead, we decided to evaluate multiple areas that influence the assessment and then determine what changes could be made in each one. So starting at the top here with Faculty Affairs leadership, we worked directly with the Associate Provost for Faculty Affairs and Steve to determine if any information on the FAR could be eliminated or perhaps gathered from another existing source. And we did decide that some of the non-essential components, faculty were once able to leave a comment on every individual section. We decided those weren't required and could be removed. Faculty can still comment on the report overall, so we still have that functionality for them. Moving down to the Faculty Advisory Board, this was a great opportunity to get direct faculty feedback from a variety of faculty across our schools and colleges. So we used our meetings with the board to review any of our proposed changes before we even implemented anything. And Steve mentioned that faculty are only in the system usually once a year. So while we had a concern that changing the FAR could be upsetting, it'll look different when they go in, they assured us that it looks different every year we go in, so go ahead and change it. And then for Elements functionality, we relied on existing functionality and then vendor expertise. So we would meet with the Symplectic team to review our proposed changes, and they provided some alternatives to what we had in mind. And in the end, we settled on a hybrid approach of using custom developed reports along with information that the faculty would add in the assessment module. Also, since we've been using the system for a few years now, over time, we've become aware of some things that we hadn't considered during our initial implementation. So we realized we could configure objects themselves to capture some of our required information. So one example of this is previously faculty would select in the assessment list, one section was internal professional activities, one section was external, and now we capture that internal external distinction directly in the object. So then we can use that criteria in our custom report. So our program analyst, Luigi Cementa, was able to develop automation to pull in eligible objects to different sections based on the business's criteria. For system improvements, again, we worked with the Symplectic technical team. They did some digging into our instance of elements, and they decided they could make some changes that would decrease the amount of time it takes us to create and copy exercises, as well as register the reports. Previously, this was pretty time consuming, just the waiting time in between these functions. So we are excited this fall as we get our exercises ready for the next review cycle to hopefully see a decrease in the time it takes. And then for support training, as Steve mentioned, we had to get away from the in-person support sessions. So what Steve did was he held virtual sessions with the liaisons themselves to go over the changes we'd implemented and to prepare them to hold additional support sessions virtually with faculty. So taking that all into mind, this is an overview of our FAR improvements. So starting with the image on the left, this 2019 FAR, this is the list that faculty would see when they would go into the assessment module. You can see it's pretty overwhelming, it's pretty lengthy. In the middle, the blurred sections are where we were able to use custom report automation. So as long as they have objects in their modules, they don't have to do anything in the FAR for these. And then the green is what we had to keep, which they do have to do during the assessment. You can see the 2020 FAR is much less overwhelming when they go in, and the report that's generated from the 2019 FAR assessment and the 2020 FAR assessment are the same final product. So leadership at BU is still getting the information they need.
So the biggest shift in our method of support was that move away from the in-person support sessions. We tried to avoid having central support as much as possible and really rely on our departmental liaisons to assist faculty as much as possible, but we did enable them to work with us to schedule one-on-one sessions with them as needed with a central team member. To kind of prepare those liaisons in advance of the review cycle, I had an initial meeting with them with a refresher course. So it was a good introduction for any new staff members, but also a refresher for returning staff members as to here are the common concerns that faculty face. Here's how it's supposed to work. Here's how you can troubleshoot when things look off. On top of that, we also created a Microsoft Team channel where liaisons could ask questions of each other and kind of lean on each other for support. And as I mentioned, liaisons are really the main support for individual faculty members and would help them get in touch with us as needed. So in terms of our success, our main goal was really to improve the faculty experience by increasing automation as much as possible. And I think that was certainly accomplished. In terms of faculty feedback, we never expect to get loud praise from faculty, especially with a mandatory process that they have to do, but we received far less negative feedback than we had in the past. And this quote from our College of Arts and Sciences liaison, CIS is definitely our biggest unit with the most faculty who have to do this. Each year has been much smoother than the last with elements, and the faculty issues this year college-wide have been much less and are much easily resolved. And certainly during a year where we had to do support completely remotely, where faculty were away from each other and couldn't help each other complete their exercises, that is certainly a win. In terms of technical resources, because we didn't have to have our in-person support sessions with our technical staff present, that really freed them up to do other things. So moving forward, I think we'll stick with this type of support model just because it was much more efficient and I think actually served faculty better in the long run. So overall, I would recommend this approach of a combination of the assessment module with custom reports that meet a specific institution's needs. But we're also certainly looking forward to all of the changes coming to the assessment module in the future. Any questions?
I can't see any questions coming in, but thank you so much for that, guys. It's really interesting to see that, and good that you're seeing such good improvement and streamlining, of course. So yes, thank you both very much.
Nat, can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Take advantage that I'm on voice. So it's Jonathan from Symplectic. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was really great. Two things really stand out: that simplifying something takes a lot of effort, but actually you get the reward. And if the reward is slightly less criticism, then that's still a success. So that's great. My one question was around where you've introduced a dependency on custom reports. How are you able to inform a faculty member whether their data is up to date? So the data you're pulling from just their profile, is that part of your communication plan with the exercise that you explain, that people need to maintain their data, therefore it will fall out of a custom report and they don't have to add it to the assessment module? Or I'm just wondering how that communication went. That's
a great point. We have an announcement that comes directly from the Office of the Provost to individual faculty. And in that, we did highlight that we simplified the process, but we also, in both that and in the instructions that faculty see when they go into assessment, it says that the first thing that they need to do is make sure that all of their activities are up to date. Just because if assessment is relying on only things that are already there, they will not see things that have not been entered yet. So we just didn't want there to be any surprises there. Great. So ask the provost to tell people to keep their profiles up to date and put a big message at the beginning. That sounds like a great tactic. I hope it works. Thank you.